Good morning, this is today's headlines for August 7, 2026. We begin with the top news where President Trump signed two executive orders aimed at limiting eligibility for birthright citizenship and cracking down on birth tourism, after the Supreme Court ruled on June 30 that his previous efforts to end birthright citizenship were unconstitutional, a 6-3 decision that the president described during an Oval Office event. In related legal news, a New Mexico judge ordered Meta to pay $567 million, on top of a $375 million jury fine, after jurors found the company misled users about the safety of its platforms and enabled the sexual exploitation of young people. The penalty will go toward a fund to remedy damages caused by those harms. Moving to Tennessee, Representative Andy Ogles, a hardline Republican known for anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant rhetoric, lost his primary to former State Agriculture Commissioner Charlie Hatcher, despite having secured President Trump's endorsement and backing from several conservative groups. Overseas, Venezuela's government turned to the international community for help after twin earthquakes struck, but years of shrinking budgets and political repression weakened its ability to rescue people trapped in rubble, as volunteers and family members searched a collapsed public housing complex in Carabalita, La Guaira state. In trade talks, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney laughed off President Trump's description of Canadians as nasty, yet warned that negotiations with the United States remain acrimonious, noting that the talks are about Canadian jobs and the future of Canadian businesses just weeks before proposed 50% tariffs are set to take effect. In Yemen, the Iranian-backed Houthi militia said it had targeted armed forces in two resource-rich provinces, Marib and Hadramaut, escalating violence that threatens a fragile truce, with the Yemeni military reporting at least 17 personnel affected. Turning to immigration enforcement, the Trump administration is sending back record numbers of Vietnamese, Laotians and Hmong refugees who arrived as young war refugees. One example cited is Mong Tran, who came to the United States at age 11 in 1993, faced deportation in 2004 after a crime, remained when Vietnam would not accept her, and was recently deported to a country she barely knows. In Tennessee politics, Senator Marsha Blackburn easily defeated two Republican rivals to win the gubernatorial nomination, positioning herself as the likely first female governor of the state after securing prominent local endorsements and high fundraising while President Trump stayed out of the race. Closer to home, prosecutors in Spokane say the man charged with setting one of three destructive blazes in eastern Washington told detectives he had planned the arson 2 weeks in advance and was responsible for lighting 24 other fires since last year. Aaron F. Farinacci, 37, was arrested after a resident saw him acting suspiciously in tall grass where the Old Trails fire began. In Washington, the Senate Homeland Security Committee voted along party lines to hold Dr. Anthony Fauci in contempt of Congress after he refused to answer questions at a hearing, invoking the Fifth Amendment. Republicans argued he was not entitled to that protection because he held a presidential pardon, noting that Fauci invoked his right to remain silent more than 100 times and denying accusations that he funded research in China that started the pandemic. On social media, Vice President J.D. Vance has abandoned the decorum of his predecessors, directly taking on opponents and journalists with sometimes profane and often personal jabs, such as his remark about a conservative columnist's appearance after a critique of his Iran stance. In Florida, two Republican lawmakers, Representatives Anna Paulina Luna and Mike Haradopoulos, endorsed a primary opponent of Representative Corey Mills, who faces assault allegations and an ethics committee investigation, despite Mills having President Trump's endorsement in a solidly Republican district. Shifting to business, the day before the World Cup final, key FIFA executives were summoned to a hastily arranged meeting at the Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan and presented with a stunning demand to sign off on a multi-billion-dollar privatization plan, a request that left the officials far from jubilant despite the tournament's record-breaking success. In health news, small produce stands and farmers markets are reporting a surge in demand for leafy greens as sales of lettuce and salad kits from major grocery chains decline amid a Cyclospora outbreak. Across the Atlantic, the Rhine River, a vital artery for European industry, is experiencing record low water levels that are disrupting supply chains, adding costs, and presenting fresh risks to growth, with low waters exposing a 1996 sunk fishing boat wreck and exacerbating pressures from heat waves, wildfires, and droughts intensified by climate change. In technology, the Federal Communications Commission voted to lift the long-standing cap that prevented a single television station owner from reaching more than 39% of U.S. households, a 2-to-1 decision that will allow case-by-case review of merger applications beyond that threshold, aiming to encourage consolidation among local broadcasters. For investors, Google Finance and Apple's Stocks app have added new features over the years to make tracking markets and personal investments easier, echoing the classic advice to know what you own and why you own it, with improved live tickers and market watching tools for securities, currencies, and indexes. In New York voter news, New Jersey's Democratic Governor Mikey Sherrill disclosed that the state improperly added as many as 6,600 non-citizens to its voter rolls, a software error that could now put those individuals at risk of forced removal from the country and jeopardize their hopes for a green card or citizenship, with roughly 400 of those non-citizens who cast ballots after registration facing serious criminal and immigration consequences. The New York City Marathon Organization announced that, for the 2028 race, entry via the popular 9+1 program will be determined by a drawing for the first time, replacing the previous guaranteed entry method after its popularity created long online wait times. Families in Harlem have sued New York City over the 2025 Legionnaires' outbreak, asserting that dangerous bacteria spewed from improperly maintained cooling towers at two city-owned sites, Harlem Hospital and a public health laboratory construction site, led to 7 deaths and over 100 illnesses. In the arts, the Bayreuth Festival marks its 150th anniversary, drawing Wagnerians from around the globe who brave heat, hard seats, and the composer's complex history for a unique music tradition, with attendees processing up a steep hill on a warm July Sunday as if before Mass to celebrate the opening performance of Rienzi. Meanwhile, the latest Avatar, The Last Airbender film is said to be moving in the right direction after a troubled franchise history, continuing to explore the Avatar's role as a master of water, earth, fire, and air who reincarnates to bring balance to the world. In Los Angeles, critic Carolina Miranda highlights 3 August shows, a group exhibit centered on Tom of Finland's erotic illustrations of square-jawed leather men and chiseled farm boys, Vijay Sar's wearable art pieces, and Esther Pearl Watson's spaceship sculptures, noting that Representative Becca Balint compared Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's notions of masculinity to the virile men depicted by Tom of Finland. Turning to books, director John Carpenter, known for defining the slasher genre from the 1970s through the 1990s, has realized his latest work Cathedral is both a graphic novel and a hard rock album, inspired by a dream of an abandoned cathedral with elevators that could plunge passengers to unknowable depths, a continuation of the terrifying visions that have marked his career since his low-budget thriller Halloween inaugurated modern slasher cinema. The New York Times Book Review offers its weekly list of 7 new books loved by critics and editors, spanning literary fiction, nonfiction, thrillers, and more. On PBS Kids, Jacqueline Woodson's animated special, The Day You Begin, based on a best-selling picture book, emphasizes how diversity enriches a community by showing that every child's story matters. In the food world, Jacques Pepin's classic La Technique celebrates its 50th anniversary, having taught Americans techniques ranging from carving swans out of apples to breaking down lamb. In science, researchers used artificial intelligence trained on libraries of DNA to generate recipes for viral genomes, producing 16 viable candidates that yielded new viruses not found in nature, a first that raises hopes for medical advances while also warning of the potential to engineer dangerous pathogens. A federal judge in Oregon ordered the Pentagon to lift its freeze on reviewing onshore wind projects, ruling that the Defense Department's halt of military reviews since April had stalled dozens of projects nationwide and unlawfully delayed wind power development. The injunction came after a coalition of renewable energy groups argued that the Trump administration had improperly suspended routine reviews. In a lighter note from Brazil, capybaras, the world's largest rodents, weighing up to 150 pounds and native to South America, wandered into a legislative building in Mato Grosso, where they were described as polite during their unexpected incursion. Regarding health trends, recent research suggests that nearly 1/3 of women aged 20 to 44 will have heart disease by 2050, up from 1/4 today, with women under 55 more likely to die from heart attacks than men in the same age group. Experts led by Dr. Emily Lau of Mass General Brigham stress that heart disease is, in fact, a woman's disease and that risks can be lowered by addressing obesity, high blood pressure, and diabetes. At the Shambhala Music Festival in British Columbia, organizers have introduced free drug testing to try to make use of substances like ketamine and MDMA safer, acknowledging that while the testing offers peace of mind, it cannot eliminate all risk amid the widespread availability of ecstasy, ketamine, and LSD. In travel, a 36-hour guide to Chicago highlights the city's summertime shine, noting that this year's light is especially bright thanks in part to the new presidential center. In real estate, the dressing table or vanity is making a comeback after disappearing from many American homes, as TikTok influencers rediscover what is described as one of the world's oldest stages. This week's listings include a 6-bedroom, 3 full and 2 half-bath, 770-square-foot renovated 3-level house in Pelham, New York, with period details such as leaded glass windows, built-ins, window seats, a formal living room with fireplace, an eat-in kitchen with laundry area, a sunroom with heated floor, a terrace off the primary bedroom suite, a backyard deck, a small lawn and a detached 1-car garage, and a 3-bedroom townhouse in New Canaan, Connecticut. Also on the market is Neil Armstrong's childhood home in Wapakoneta, Ohio, a 2-story house on a corner lot listed for $430,000. the single-family structure built in 1908 was purchased by the Armstrong family in 1944, and the astronaut's boyhood bedroom now displays memorabilia collected by or given to Karen Mikesell, an 82-year-old retired history teacher who has owned the home since 1988. In Modern Love, Jessica Scienson Enriquez writes about wanting to live like a turtle in the safety of her shell, noting that a female sea turtle's natal homing instinct, carrying an internal map of her birthplace, mirrors the way humans may carry unseen goals, and that she began to fear in her late 30s that more life lay behind her than ahead. In a mini-vows piece, Maya Como describes driving 2 hours from her farm in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, for a first date with Rich Olea in Philadelphia, recalling his comment that she reminded him of Eva Gabor's character from Green Acres, and how the conversation flowed from drinks at Park to dinner at Wilder to more drinks at the Randstad Room. Another mini-vows entry tells of Amber Parrish, executive director of the United Food and Commercial Workers Western States Council, and Vikram Iyer, who led public policy at Postmates, now owned by Uber, meeting his adversaries in one of California's most expensive and closely watched political fights, with their first in-person encounter in San Francisco in spring 2019 shortly after she assumed her union role. In the obituaries, Sydney Tall, who chronicled her battle with cholangiocarcinoma on TikTok and built a following of more than 1 million, died at 26 from complications of metastatic bile duct cancer, having challenged assumptions about how people with serious illnesses should look and live. John O'Malley, a Bronx detective and federal investigator who helped prosecute violent crimes under federal law and participated in high-profile exonerations at the U.S. Attorney's Office, died at 73 from leukemia linked to his exposure to toxins at Ground Zero during the September 11 investigation. James Urbaniak, a pioneer of microscopic surgery in the 1970s who revolutionized trauma care techniques, died at 90 after retrieving the thumb of a 17-year-old water skier that had been severed by a tow rope and placing it on ice before flying the teenager to Duke University for reattachment. In the magazine section, an essay explores how the word scam has expanded to describe any system that profits at another's expense, noting that the idea of alcohol as a scam has become a meme, with advertising images of happiness and sophistication undercut by the reality that excessive drinking erodes those very qualities. Finally, the magazine notes that Brian Cashman, who has overseen 4 World Series titles and 0 losing seasons as the Yankees' top baseball executive, faces calls from fans for his departure. In Opinion, a guest essay examines the reasons behind the Trump administration's support for the yen, suggesting motives go beyond pure economics, as it did with the Argentine peso. Another piece asks what the insurgent left's project truly is, arguing that Bernie Sanders is not doing the Democrats any favors. A third essay questions whether the Metropolitan Museum of Art is making a serious mistake by potentially making anti-Semitism the theme of the Met Gala. A fourth explains 4 bits of Silicon Valley jargon that could help forecast whether America's largest AI companies will earn enough to justify massive spending. A fifth essay argues that both Democrats and Republicans are playing with fire in the current political climate. A sixth contends that critics of the U.S. Saudi nuclear deal have it wrong, warning that delays could push the kingdom and others toward less stringent agreements with adversaries. And lastly, an episode of Interesting Times featuring Ross Douthat and Scott Galloway discusses how society has abandoned its unremarkable young men and what can be done to help a struggling generation. That's your briefing, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.